Welcome to our deep dive. Today we're going to be cracking open Ron Chernow's The House of Morgan.
Oh, very cool.
And, it's a fascinating look into high finance in American history. And this book, explores the story of a family that really had their hands in everything.
Yeah,
The Morgans.
absolutely.
And I think you might be surprised to learn that they played such a key role in things like the Panic of 1907.
Oh, yeah.
And even the creation of the Federal Reserve.
Right.
And to help us unravel the story of this financial dynasty, we have our expert speaker.
It's great to be here.
So expert speaker, this book takes us on quite a journey.
It does.
From the Morgan family's humble beginnings in England,
Yeah.
all the way to becoming these titans of Wall Street.
Yeah.
What really stood out to you from their story? What was something that you were just like, wow, I can't believe that?
I think what's so fascinating is their foresight from the very beginning.
Right.
They were focused on building a business that could thrive independently without having to rely on outside investors.
Right.
That's a powerful lesson in financial independence that I think still resonates today.
It really does.
Yeah.
It's like they were playing the long game from the start.
Yeah.
Building a foundation that could withstand any storm.
Yeah.
And speaking of storms, they certainly faced their fair share, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
The Panic of 1907 comes to mind.
Yeah.
A full-blown financial crisis.
Wow.
Banks are collapsing, stock market in free fall.
Yeah.
But, as Chernow points out, J.P. Morgan himself steps in, orchestrates a rescue effort that prevents a complete economic disaster.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
That detail really stuck with me, too. It's like just the thought of one man wielding that much influence
Yeah.
to stabilize the entire financial system. It just shows these incredible power dynamics at play
Right.
back in that era.
Yeah, and I think that really speaks to the Morgans' overall role in shaping modern finance.
Right.
They were instrumental in the creation of the Federal Reserve.
Oh.
The system that helps to regulate our economy today.
So they were laying the groundwork for the financial systems we use every day.
I think in many ways they were.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's pretty incredible.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, you can see how their actions rippled through history.
Yeah.
I mean, the Morgans, they didn't just make money.
Right.
They shaped the rules of the game.
Right.
Influencing how businesses are financed, how investments are made, and even how governments respond to economic crises.
Wow. It's like they were these architects designing the structure of modern finance
Yes.
as we know it.
I think that's a great way to put it.
But with that much power, there must have been some controversy
Of course.
along the way.
There always is.
Right.
Chernow doesn't shy away from those more controversial aspects of their legacy.
Right.
Things like their involvement in monopolies.
Right.
And allegations of insider trading. These were practices that raised ethical questions then and continue to be debated today.
It's true. And it's really interesting to think about those issues and how they've evolved over time.
Yeah.
But even amidst all the controversies, you can't deny their influence on Wall Street during the Gilded Age.
Absolutely.
It's almost like their story is synonymous with that era of opulence and power.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think Chernow does a great job of painting this picture of that world, describing J.P. Morgan's extravagant lifestyle.
Yeah.
His art collection, his mistresses, his enormous yacht.
It's hard to even fathom all of that wealth and
That's true.
influence.
It's a glimpse into the rarefied air of the financial elite.
Yeah. But I'm curious, how did their immense wealth and influence contrast with the reality of many Americans during that period?
Sure.
Because wasn't the Gilded Age also a time of immense inequality?
It absolutely was.
Yeah.
While the Morgans and their peers enjoyed unprecedented wealth and power, many Americans faced poverty, exploitation, and really limited opportunities.
Right.
This stark contrast, I think, highlights a really complex relationship between wealth, power, and responsibility.
Yeah.
It's a theme that runs throughout Chernow's book.
It definitely makes you think about, the broader social implications of, concentrated wealth and power, even in the world of high finance.
Right.
But let's bring it back to the Morgans for a second. How do their actions, their successes, and maybe even some of their missteps still affect how we invest and manage money today?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
I think the Morgans were really pioneers in investment banking,
Okay.
helping to create the systems that we still use to raise capital and finance businesses.
Right.
But they also championed the idea of long-term disciplined investing,
Right.
which is something that I think modern investors can learn a lot from.
So what can we learn from their approach? Were they essentially early proponents of what we now call value investing?
In a way, I think yes. They focused on finding solid businesses, investing for the long term,
Right.
and not getting swept up in all the short-term market hype.
Yeah.
One of the most powerful tools we have today for this type of investing is the Systematic Investment Plan, or SIP, which allows you to invest a fixed amount regularly, regardless of market conditions.
So that's like a page straight out of the Morgan playbook?
Kind of, yeah.
But adapted for the modern investor.
Exactly.
It shows that their story is still relevant today.
Very much so.
Even in our complex financial landscape.
Absolutely. But as you mentioned earlier, their story also raises important questions about, responsibility and ethics in finance. I mean, the Morgans held immense power, and their actions had far-reaching consequences.
Right.
Which leads to an important question for today.
Okay.
Knowing what we know about this concentration of wealth and power in the financial world,
right,
what safeguards do we need to ensure a fair and stable financial system for everyone?
That's a question that deserves a lot of careful consideration.
It does.
It's easy to get caught up in all the, fascinating details of the Morgan story. But you really have to step back and look at the big picture.
Yeah.
What lessons can we learn from their successes and their mistakes?
Right.
How can we use that knowledge to build a more equitable and sustainable financial system for the future?
Those are exactly the questions I hope you'll ponder as we continue our deep dive into the House of Morgan.
And we have a lot more to explore.
We do.
Next, we'll be examining the inner workings of Wall Street during the Gilded Age and the specific financial strategies the Morgans employed to build their empire. So stay tuned.
Looking forward to it.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the House of Morgan. So, we've been talking about this incredible family and their impact on American finance.
Yes.
But let's step back in time a little bit. To the late 19th and early 20th centuries.
Right.
The heart of the Gilded Age.
Yeah. And really take a closer look at this financial world that the Morgans were operating in. I mean, it's a world of, top hats and horse-drawn carriages where fortunes were made and lost on a handshake.
Yeah.
So what were some of the, the key financial strategies that allowed them to navigate this landscape?
Well, one thing that stands out to me is their emphasis on relationships.
Oh, interesting.
They really understood that trust was the foundation of any financial transaction.
Right.
So they built these strong connections with other powerful figures.
Oh, wow.
Both in the U.S. and internationally.
So it wasn't just about the financial expertise.
Yeah.
It was about being part of this network.
It was about who you knew.
Okay.
Exactly. They cultivated relationships with industrialists, politicians, even royalty.
Wow.
These connections gave them access to valuable information, unique opportunities, and a level of trust that was crucial in the often cutthroat world of finance. It's fascinating how they leveraged those relationships to really achieve their goals.
Yeah.
But beyond networking, what were some of the, more specific financial tactics that they employed? Were there any particular strategies that really jumped out at you?
One of their key strengths was their ability to identify undervalued assets and industries.
Okay.
They weren't afraid to take risks, but they did so with a keen eye for long-term potential.
Got it.
For example, they invested heavily in railroads.
Oh, railroads.
Recognizing their essential role in the expanding American economy.
Well, yeah, it's such an iconic symbol of American industrial might.
Right.
You can see why they saw the potential there, but wasn't investing in railroads a risky move at the time?
Of course, every investment carries some degree of risk.
Right.
But the Morgans were masters of mitigating that risk.
Okay.
They didn't just passively invest in railroads.
Right.
They actively sought to consolidate and reorganize them.
Okay.
Bringing order to a chaotic industry.
Oh, interesting.
They used their financial influence to stabilize, streamline operations.
Right.
And ultimately boost profitability.
Wow.
This approach became known as Morganization.
Morganization. I love that term. It really captures their hands-on approach.
Exactly.
It's like they weren't just waiting for returns.
No.
They were actively shaping these businesses that they were investing in.
That's right. And this Morganization strategy wasn't limited to railroads.
Right.
They applied it to other industries as well, like steel.
Oh, wow.
Shipping, even electricity.
It's like they were playing a giant game of chess.
Yeah.
Just strategically moving these pieces, forming alliances, and ultimately trying to control these key sectors of the economy.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
And in chess, Every move they made had consequences.
Right.
Their actions undoubtedly contributed to the concentration of wealth and power in the hands of a select few.
Yeah.
A trend that continues to have implications today.
Right.
But it's important to remember the historical context.
Right.
You know, the Gilded Age was a period of rapid economic transformation.
Right.
And the Morgans played a significant role in shaping that transformation.
So it's a complex legacy.
It is.
Now let's shift gears a bit and talk about the Morgans' personal lives.
Okay.
Chernow doesn't really shy away from some of the more scandalous details, does he?
Not at all.
Yeah.
Remember, this is a time when the lines between personal and professional life were often blurred.
Right.
Especially among the wealthy elite.
Okay.
J.P. Morgan himself was known for his lavish lifestyle.
Yeah.
His art collection, his multiple mistresses.
It's like a glimpse into this bygone era of, extravagant parties and opulent mansions and, let's just say, complicated personal relationships.
Yeah. And those personal details aren't just salacious gossip.
Right.
They offer valuable insights into the social dynamics of the time.
I see.
The Morgans' world was one of immense privilege and power.
Right.
But it was also a world of social constraints and expectations.
Right.
Their actions, both public and private, were subject to intense scrutiny.
Right.
And often influenced by this complex web of relationships they had cultivated.
So even their personal lives were intertwined with their business dealings.
In many ways.
In ways that we might find hard to imagine today.
Right.
It's a reminder that these were real people with flaws and passions and ambitions.
It worked.
Just like us.
Yeah.
It's just that their decisions had much greater repercussions.
Yeah, that's a key takeaway. Their story is a tale of ambition power and the complexities of human nature.
Right.
All set against the backdrop of this really transformative period in American history.
It really is.
Yeah.
But as we've been discussing, the Morgans weren't without their flaws.
Right.
And their immense power sometimes had unintended consequences.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts on the responsibility that comes with that kind of vast financial power?
Right.
That's a question that really resonates even more so today.
Right.
Well, we live in a world where the financial systems are so complex and so interconnected that the decisions of just a few people can impact, millions of lives.
Absolutely.
So understanding how these systems evolved and the role that people like the Morgans played is so important.
It is.
For navigating our own financial world.
I agree. It's like we're learning from the past to inform the present.
Right.
We can see how their actions contributed to both progress and problems.
Yeah.
And hopefully use that knowledge to create a more equitable system for everyone.
Well, and speaking of learning from the past, one of the things that I think is really valuable from the Morgan story is just this idea of thinking long term.
Yes.
They understood that building wealth takes time.
Right.
It takes discipline.
Discipline.
And it takes a willingness to weather those storms.
Absolutely. They were masters of the long game.
They were.
They weren't chasing quick profits.
Right.
They were focused on building something that would last.
It's almost like they had a built-in SIP, a systematic investment plan for building an empire.
Right.
You mentioned earlier how that tool can help everyday investors achieve their goals.
Right.
Could you talk a little bit more about that?
Sure. A systematic investment plan allows you to invest a fixed amount regularly.
Okay.
In a chosen investment, like a mutual fund or something.
Right.
And it's a really powerful tool for building wealth over time.
Okay.
And it aligns perfectly with that Morgan philosophy of, long-term investing.
So even if we don't have the same level of, capital or connections as the Morgans, we can still apply their principles to our own financial lives.
We might not be building railroad empires.
Right.
But we can still make those smart choices focused on the long term.
I like that. That's very empowering.
Yeah.
It's like we're taking a page from their playbook, but adapting it for today.
Exactly.
Now, before we wrap up, I want to ask you one final question.
Okay.
Knowing what we know now about the concentration of power in finance, what safeguards do you think are important?
That's a big question.
It is.
And one that I think deserves a lot more discussion.
Right.
But I think transparency is key.
Okay.
We need regulations that are strong to prevent those abuses of power.
Right.
And we need to make sure people are financially literate so they can make good choices.
Okay.
Ultimately, I think we need a system that encourages innovation, but also protects against risk.
Right.
And makes sure things are fair for everyone.
That's a great point. It reminds us that finance isn't just about, numbers and markets.
Yeah, it's about people.
It's about people.
And the impact it has on our lives.
Well, expert speaker, thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive.
It was my pleasure.
Into the House of Morgan. It's been fascinating.
Yeah, it has.
And I think it's a good reminder that even though these events happened, a century ago, the lessons we can learn from them are still so relevant today.
Absolutely.
So for everyone listening, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for listening.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep investing in your own financial journey.